What is up, everybody? This is Adam. Welcome back to Fouled Out. Well, it took an extra week, but we are finally here. The NBA Finals is set. The Miami Heat versus the Denver Nuggets, tipping off the day this podcast was released, Thursday, June 1st. Good on the Celtics for coming back and giving us an extra week of basketball, but man, that game 7 was a tough watch for any Boston fan, I'm sure. Matt and Clint are going to be joining me in just a minute here to break down the end of that Celtics Heat series, talk about the future of the Celtics, and then preview the NBA Finals. I promise, this will be the last Celtics segment on the podcast this year. We always end up talking a lot of Celtics, a lot of 76ers, and a lot of Warriors during the playoffs, just because those seem to be the most dramatic teams and have the most going on the last couple of years. But this is going to be it, man. After this, it's all Denver and Miami for the next couple of weeks. And then Matt and I will release the upcoming podcast schedule as we finish up our NBA coverage in a couple of weeks and start looking into some NFL topics. Excited to get back into football here in a couple of weeks. But for now, we're talking NBA Finals. Let's go. All right, Matt is here. Clint was here, but due to technical difficulties, we lost him. So he may pop up later in the podcast, but for now, it's just the two of us. What's up, Matt? How are you doing?
I'm all right. I'm hopeful that the Shadow Realm cannot contain our friend, but we'll see.
It was so promising. We were trying to get him on last week too to talk Heat Celtics, and then we had him, and then we lost him. Just like the Celtics, we had it, and then we lost it at the last minute. So good luck to Clint. Hopefully, if you guys hear a third person pop up in the middle of the podcast, don't be too shocked. It's just Clint.
I would be surprised if anyone else just randomly popped in here.
You never know with this podcast sometimes. So I promised the fans during the intro that this would be the last podcast where we talk Celtics this year. And unless like something crazy happens in the offseason, we're going to keep that promise. I continue not to know what to make of this Celtics team with this core of Tatum and Brown and Smart and Horford. Last week when we talked, they were down 3-1. And I made a little bit of a case for them to come back in this series. You know, we talked about how the formula was potentially there, even though it was unlikely. They come all the way back from 3-0 to force a game 7 at home. The first time that a team's ever come back from 3-0 to force a home game 7. And then they come out and just lay an absolute egg.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand it. And I know Tatum got hurt and that there's a lot of stories like floating around about how he was a shell of himself during that game, but
this is game 7. First of all, like there's a lot of people who would have said that you shouldn't have even been in this situation to begin with. You certainly shouldn't have been down 3-0 to begin with. Quite frankly, what we saw from him in game 7 was what we've seen from him pretty much all series. I don't want to hear it because I've seen him play that way without being hurt. So hurt or not, it doesn't matter. He didn't bring enough.
It's tough because the rest of the team really couldn't step up. Mm-hmm. You know, whether or not he was 100%. You would expect someone like Jaylen Brown to step up in that situation, and Derek White, now Horford, all these guys. The game just felt over from the very beginning. Mm-hmm. The Celtics went 0 of 12 on their first 12 threes. And I was texting you after the 11th three, and I was like, you know, maybe don't shoot so many threes if you're having so much trouble making them. And it's like, it's just who they are. Yep. Their plan is that we're going to take a bunch of threes, and if they go in, we win and look like the best team in the NBA. And if they don't go in, we lose. Just,
Yeah.
it's live and die by it.
Well, I mean, I said it last week when we talked about it. Like they did this all year long. They took a ton of threes. So even when you pointed out, hey, they actually play a lot better when they don't take as many threes, they cannot be expected to consistently play that way because they haven't built those habits. So yeah, I fully expected them to revert at some point over the 4 games that they had to win. And they're just not, they were never going to do that 4 games in a row.
It's just such a weird way to play for a team that on paper had more talent than the other team.
Oh yeah.
Like
not even close.
You shoot a lot of threes to add variance to the game and to like kind of even it when you're not as talented. Like I think of the 17-18 Houston Rockets, who were like really the first team that was like, we're just going to take 40 plus threes a game. And one of the reasons they did that is because they were going up against teams like the Golden State Warriors, who had Kevin Durant in the playoffs. And in order to win that series, they needed to add variance to the game.
Yeah.
And the two ways you do that, you either shoot a bunch of threes or you slow the game down and make less possessions. And it was Mike D'Antoni and it was Daryl Morey. So there was no way they were slowing the game down. And they had a lot of success with that, except when it came to game 7 against the Golden State Warriors.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden the threes aren't falling and you have no backup plan.
Yeah.
Like that's the most infamous example because they went 0 for 27 at one point in that game.
Yep.
This is just 0 for 12, but like it had that similar feeling where it's like, okay, these are not going in. You need a backup plan. And I think that's the problem for a lot of modern NBA offenses is that they're so reliant on the three that it kind of like, the math shows that taking a lot of threes is like quote unquote a good thing for NBA teams. But I would like to see studies that like talk about the quality of the threes you're taking. Because if you're taking like 40 threes and 20 of them are like well guarded hand in your face threes, there's no way that that's better than trying to drive and get like a layup or a foul.
Statistics show that it's better to shoot a lot of threes because on a larger sample size, when teams do that, they get better at shooting threes with their larger sample size, and 3 points is more than 2 points. However, when you shoot 42 threes in a game 7, it's not good when you only make 21% of them. Steal a quote from one of our favorite shows, mutual favorite shows, Scrubs. Statistics means nothing to the individual. I don't care that like the analytics say it's better to shoot more threes. If you can't hit a 3 in this game and you need to win it to advance, then try to get a layup.
I appreciate you throwing in Scrubs, but I think that that's just a quote. I don't
know. No, I mean
it quote.
Literally. No, that's literally true.
My point is just like people look at the math and the analytics and they're like, well, when the Celtics hit 40% of their threes in a game, they're 36-2. And like we talked about that in the last podcast. It's like, yeah, when they're hitting, they're really, really good.
Yeah.
But there's just different quality of threes.
Yeah.
Right. Like he spent the entire game 7 trying to run them off the 3-point line.
Mm-hmm.
They had opportunities to get into the paint and score. Like you saw Derek White was just like consistently penetrating and scoring near the end of that game. And when they got good threes, it was because of ball movement and it was because of penetration.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest problem I think with the Celtics is they're so determined to shoot 43s a game that they're taking a bunch of isolation pull-up threes. And those are the ones I want to eliminate. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not saying don't shoot the open three. Sometimes you're just cold, and if you're cold, you're cold, and that happens. But it's okay, we've already missed 10 in a row. Let me take a step back three in this guy's face with a hand directly in my face. Those are the problem for me.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, that's the only way you get to shooting 20% on 40 plus threes, because you're so stubborn about having missed the last 10 that you won't make an adjustment. I'm never going to advocate that, if your shot's not falling, stop shooting. But that doesn't mean you need to take every shot that you've ever seen. Like, you don't need 5 J.R. Smiths on the floor. I don't think that's ever worked.
It would if they were all hot. It would totally work.
If they all got hot at the same time, it would be unstoppable.
It's like, wait, they won 400-93? What the hell?
The problem is, in a playoff series, you'd have 4 games where they're all cold at the same time.
That's the problem. Yeah, this sounds like obvious analysis, but I stick by my opinion that if the Celtics had shot 30% on 33s instead of 20% on 43s, that this is a completely different ball game. But I also want to give all the credit in the world to the Heat, because that was a gutsy performance.
It was.
That's to blow a 3-0 lead and have game 6 end on your home court the way that it ended, with Derek White getting that tip in at the last second.
Yeah.
And then to come back and beat the shit out of the Celtics in Boston. That's next level balls to go do that. That's incredible.
I know it's not true, but it almost feels like Jimmy's master plan.
They're just waiting.
Let them taste it. They they think that they're gonna, create history. Boston's gonna, be thinking their own shit smells like roses, and just absolutely annihilate them in game 7.
It honestly kind of felt like part of it to me is that the Celtics and the Boston fans and the atmosphere, everybody seemed so confident that Boston was going to win that game.
Yeah.
I kind of felt like a tip off. I felt like Boston was going to win before the game started.
I did not. You and I talked about this a very different way than you did.
Yeah. But as soon as I turned on the broadcast and saw the hype videos and the guys pumping up their chest and all, I was like, oh, they're going to lose. I felt like they were going to lose really early in that game. And then Tatum turns his ankle on the first play. And I was like, yeah, they're 100% going to lose. It was just, as someone who's watched things go wrong for Boston teams in the past, it had that feeling. The Super Bowls that the Patriots lost during the Tom Brady, Bill Belichick era were the games that I was most confident they would win. The 18-1 Super Bowl, the revenge Super Bowl against the Giants, and then the Nick Foles Super Bowl. I was extremely confident we would win all of those games. But it's just part of the Boston sports fan DNA that we're typically very negative about our teams. We're typically oh God, turn this game off. We're going to lose. This is awful. And then they win. Even when we had Tom Brady, it was oh God, I feel like we're going to lose this game all the time. It's just the Boston history. The games where they were the most confident, or the situations where we've been the most confident, are always the situations where Boston teams lose. And I'm not a Celtics fan. I'm just saying this is just a general Boston thing. Think about the Bruins set the record for the most points in the history of the NHL. Best record in the history of the NHL. And people are they are going to trash the Panthers, no problem. And they get knocked out in 7 in the first round. Also, Bruins game 7 at home against the Blues last time the Bruins were in the Stanley Cup. I was super confident we were going to win that game. I was like, damn, I was listening to all my Boston pump up music during the day. I was all excited. Doesn't happen. And so when I turned it on and I saw the atmosphere and I saw how confident everybody was, I started feeling it. I was like, oh, this is not going to go well for them.
Yeah, for me, the tip off was 2 days earlier. The Derek White tip in, like, that's great. It's great play. That game 7 goes differently, and that's a moment that like would go down in like Boston sports history. A lot of people seem to forget like the previous 5 minutes of play of basketball where the Celtics completely shit the bed. The Heat had no business being back in that game. Heading into that final play, it was very clear at that point in time which team had earned the victory and which team had not. And it was certainly not the Celtics at that point. And they just kind of got lucky on a tip in because, I mean, at that point, you're kind of just like jumping and swatting at the ball and hoping it goes the right direction.
I will say it was lucky from the perspective that the ball happened to bounce the right way off the rim
Yeah.
for White to get the tip.
I'm not saying that the Heat didn't have fault on their end for allowing it to happen, but for that to have gone in, like more than 9 times out of 10, that ball doesn't go in.
Yeah, I think what happened really though is that like Smart took the shot and they expected that to be the buzzer to go off while that shot was in the air, so they stopped playing. And Bam just let Derek White run right to the rim. So like it's partially on their defense, but like the ball did have to bounce a very particular way for him to get that tip. But
yeah,
but just like to have game 6 end that way on your home court, which actually like the ending to that game was super similar to game 7 between these two teams last year, where Miami had no business winning game 7. And then all of a sudden Jimmy's taking a 3 to try to put it away. It just happens to miss.
Yeah.
But like aside,
maybe he makes it if he rested for 30 seconds in the game.
Right. But aside from that, teams were 111 and 36 in home game 7s throughout NBA history prior to this game. It's good for about a 75% winning percentage.
Mm-hmm.
Also, prior to this game, the Celtics were 27 and 9 in game 7s all time. So I know it's past statistics and it means nothing to that game, but to have game 6 end the way it did, and then you're looking at like home teams almost always win game 7s. The Celtics historically are very good in game 7s, and just for the Heat to be like, yeah, but F that noise. We're just going to go beat their asses on their home court.
I think the thing that people are missing when they like look at those game 7 stats is that there's another stat that they're not citing there, and it's that nobody has ever come back from being down 3-0. Just in general, it's hard, really, really hard to beat one team 4 times in a row. It's even harder to do that when that team also just beat you 3 times in a row. And if, we're talking about the playoffs, so they're clearly a good basketball team. We're talking about the Eastern Conference Finals, so they're a great basketball team, and you have to beat them 4 times in a row. Like, that just generally doesn't happen.
Generally doesn't happen.
You just cannot expect that to work out that way. And I'm sure someday it'll finally happen and we'll all have our minds blown on that. But I will believe it when I see it because there's a reason why it doesn't happen. Usually the better team wins the first 3 games.
Yeah, I mean, I think the better team won the series as well. It's just the nature of this core of the Celtics to be so up and down like this, and to be as down as you can be and then as up as you can be and then down again. it's not shocking, but I, I don't know what you do with this team moving forward because like we talked about this in depth last week,
Mm-hmm.
but they got to make a decision on they got to make a decision on Brown's extension this offseason. And like I just don't know if I'm gonna pay $100+ million for Tatum and Brown when you guys just got outplayed by Caleb Martin in the conference finals. Caleb Martin, who
Yeah.
got cut by the Hornets. The Hornets didn't want Caleb Martin.
Well, in fairness, I think the Hornets would very much like to have him back.
I think so. But
So
how do you even make that choice on Brown right now, though, after how bad he was in game 7? Like
yeah,
when Tatum gets hurt, he needs to step up. And he goes 8 of 23 from the floor for 19 points, 1 of 9 from three, 8 turnovers,
yeah,
including losing his own dribble multiple times because
yeah,
he, again, cannot dribble a basketball. Finishes the series shooting 16% from three with 25 turnovers. His turnovers were higher than his shooting percentage from three in the Eastern Conference Finals. And now he wants a contract that's going to start at $50 million and escalate to $66 million by the end because he's eligible for the Supermax extension. I don't know how you give him that in good conscience.
yeah. I mean, I think the counterpoint to that is, you know, where are you improving your team if you don't sign that contract, right? It's. I mean, we obviously floated around the potential Dame Lillard trade, which I hope for his sake that he doesn't have to go play in Boston. But uh,
Well, it seems more likely at this point that Portland would like try to trade for Jaylen Brown without giving
yeah,
up Dame Lillard.
right.
Seems
Which I
like
think would actually be a perfect fit.
I guess,
Like
but like
a soup, basically souped up Jeremy Grant.
I don't know. Jaylen Brown just feels like a guy who is going to get traded somewhere like Portland this summer.
Yeah,
And the fans are going to be super excited. They're like, oh man, we got Dame, we got Brown, we're back, we're going to make a run. And then they're going to get knocked out in the second round of the playoffs next year.
yeah.
And they're going to be wondering what happened. And it's like,
Well, it's what
look no
happens every
further.
time you build your team around superstars that you didn't draft because you don't have the depth to make it work. You can survive Jaylen Brown having a rough series when you have the role players that can step up and like support when he's not able to do it for a series. When you have basically like your roster is, if you're making that trade, Dame, Brown, and maybe Nurkic, assuming you're not losing him in that trade, and then everyone else of value on that team is probably being thrown in the trade. Like, okay, how do you step up in that scenario when someone goes cold? You can't, and that's exactly what happened to the Celtics when Brown and Tatum couldn't step it up.
I feel like whoever trades for Brown is basically going to be doing like the Mikal Bridges thing all over again, where it's like, so say like the trade is like Simons, Sharp, and like a sign and trade of Jeremy
Yeah,
Grant, something like that. And we're just going to be watching Simons next year with Tatum and just being like, God, like I kind of would rather have Simons than Jaylen
yeah,
Brown at this point. I'm not like, I'm a Jaylen Brown fan. I like
yeah.
him a lot. It's just like, it's really hard to watch him continually have
Someone
these.
needs to lock him in a gym that has no rims.
It's like,
So all he can do is dribble.
yeah, it's the turnovers and it's the fact that it feels like he's regressed on defense.
I mean that happens to all these guys though when they go to into a more and more prominent offensive role. Every single one of them. I mean, I saw Jeremy Grant's defense regress when he came to Detroit. So I mean, some of that is to be expected when they are stepping up into a prominent offensive role. And to a certain degree, like some of that's on them, but also a lot of it is on, okay, well, like the roster building and creating the structure of this team needs to be better so that your best players can still play defense.
Yeah, I just feel like he's going to be the most overhyped acquisition of the summer. This summer, if the Celtics do decide to trade him.
Yeah, I think it depends on like how much is given up for him. If there's a strong structure around him still, that's a really good pickup. Granted, paying anyone that much money, like I don't know, there's just a very, very small group of players in the NBA that are worth it. And while I am very much a Jaylen Brown fan, he is not one of them. Jason Tatum is not one of them to me. Like, might be able to fill a hand of guys that I'm like, yeah, I'll pay them the super max.
Yeah, well, when Jaylen Brown ends up on the Sacramento Kings this summer, then I'll go back and delete this segment of the podcast. No, I guess the last thing on the Celtics, real quick. I guess two things. One, I've known Tatum is not that guy since he wore the Kobe Bryant armband last year. He'll just never. I will never forget it, and I will never forgive ever. You can't wear the purple and gold armband when you're on the Boston Celtics. You can't do it.
Here's how you know he never had a mama mentality. Because Kobe Bryant was able to get along with him. Like, Kobe Bryant could not stand to be in the same room as another Kobe Bryant. Are you fucking kidding me?
Honestly, like if Kobe Bryant was alive right now, I think Jimmy Butler would be his favorite player. But
Oh, for sure.
he would hate Jimmy Butler though. Like they would not get along. Um, and the last thing I wanted to say, because we've gone too long on the Celtics already. But it's like this could just be like a Celtics podcast where we would just bitch about the Celtics all the time, even though neither of us is a fan.
They're
Like
an infuriating team.
we could just do it because God, there's just so much meat on the bone there. They did a hype video where they had David Ortiz talk about the 2004 Boston Red Sox and Julian Edelman talk about the 2016 New England Patriots that came back from being down 28-3 in a Super Bowl against the Atlanta Falcons. In case people don't remember that happened. And just like to invoke two of the greatest sports teams in Boston sports history and be like, it's not about making history, it's about becoming history was like the tagline. And then to come out and to do this in game 7 in Boston, I hope that they are ashamed of themselves. Like I'm not a Celtics fan, so like it extra pissed me off that I'm like, you took two of the most formative teams of my entire sporting fan experience, like two of my most beloved teams ever. That like the 2004 Boston Red Sox are my favorite sports team ever. Ever. And so to like bring that imagery up and then shit your pants is unforgivable. Like that's going up there with the Kobe Bryant armband thing to me with Jason Tatum. Is like, I'm going to remember next year, we're going to come back and I'm going to be like, you did this shit.
Yeah.
I will not forgive you, Boston Celtics.
Jason Tatum, not a top 10 player.
Nope. Uh, so that's it. The podcast is now Boston free until
Woo!
until I start bitching about the New England Patriots. So we have like a good 30 minutes where we're not going to talk about Boston.
We're the
Let's talk.
worst.
Yeah, I know. I'm horrible. I have a lot of Patriot thoughts. They practiced today, and I have a lot of thoughts, but I'm going to save them. We're going to try to save them until we get to the AFC East preview pod. Let's talk about the two teams that we should be talking about.
Yeah.
The NBA finals start tonight, the night that this podcast is released, June 1st, Thursday. The Denver Nuggets play the Miami Heat in what I am calling a beautifully weird NBA finals. I said, like, just picture it. Just picture Jokic playing in Miami in an NBA finals. It seems so weird. And we're going to get it. And I think it's such an awesome thing. I like this matchup. I don't think it's going to be a good finals, but I just like that it's like two, I don't know. They say small market teams. I understand Denver's a little bit of a smaller market for basketball. Miami, I don't know. They had LeBron James and Dwayne Wade. I don't really consider it a small
Miami is
market.
not a small market.
But it's an odd matchup that we've never seen before because it's the Nuggets' first NBA finals, and I think it's a beautiful thing.
It's two teams that aren't continually force fed down your throat. And we
Well,
don't
not
get
not since
that.
LeBron left.
Yeah. Well, they were only forced down your throat because LeBron was there. They did not do that when it was just Dwayne Wade.
Yeah.
So, which honestly, I would have been more okay with that. So at least Dwayne Wade was, reasonably likable. So, but yeah, no, I think that it's nice to see this kind of finals. I just how I appreciated it when it was, Bucks versus Suns. It's a nice change of pace. The perspective of like looking at how these teams are going to match up with each other, I find this to be a very interesting finals.
I guess I'm just going to spoil my pick and just do it up front. Um, I think it's an interesting finals, and I like the aesthetic and like the thought of who the two teams are.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going Nuggets in 5. And I honestly, when I was thinking about it today, I kind of wanted to go Nuggets in 4.
I don't think there's a chance of a sweep.
No, that's kind of where I was at. As I was kind of like, man, I really think the Nuggets are going to run away with this series, but just out of respect to Jimmy,
Mm-hmm.
I gave Miami 1.
Yeah. The Nuggets are completely out of rhythm now. They haven't played in a while. And I'm not saying that's going to translate to them losing the series, but, Miami's gotten 3 rest days to kind of get their legs back a little bit. So I don't really think like the whole like, oh, they're gassed is too much of an issue heading into the series. I do think going to Denver is a problem because it's been a problem all year. And Denver's been the best home court team, like possibly ever.
Going to
Is that
Denver
a
has
thing?
just like been a problem, period.
Yeah.
Denver is just climate wise the hardest place to play in all of sports.
Yeah. That being said, like, if there is a star that is going to say, fuck it, I don't care, and make it work, it's going to be Jimmy. Because I feel like in his free time, he goes out and finds things that are frustrating and annoying just to get himself pissed off. I think it'll most likely be Nuggets in 6, but I will not be surprised if the Heat pull this off. Just because if they can steal one in Denver, then like that throws everything off.
Yeah,
The Heat this time of year too in Miami, like Jokic is a big dude. He's gonna have to
Yeah,
deal with that.
you're playing inside though. Like they're not gonna. I mean, unless they do
No,
what.
no, but like you got to keep in mind, like dealing with heat all day long, that'll take the energy out of you.
Yeah, I don't know. They're gonna like sleep in a nice hotel and then they're gonna go to the stadium first thing in the morning while it's still somewhat cool and just be in the training room like all day.
I highly doubt that they're not gonna like have some outside time to kind of like on their rest days, like it, it.
Yeah,
It could certainly be a factor.
it could be. I'm just not as concerned about that as I am about the altitude in Denver. Like
No,
you're not like playing outside. It's not like playing the Dolphins.
no, but when you're talking about someone who's historically had some conditioning issues, something to at least like dog ear a page.
Yeah. Yeah, and I like the Nuggets will have had 10 days off before the first game.
Yeah,
So, like you said, they might be out of rhythm. We're going to have to see how that affects them.
yeah,
I used to not love this sounds like kind of counterintuitive, but I used to not love like the Patriots would always get buys in the first round of the playoffs. And it's like, God, we haven't played in like 2 weeks. This other team is playing.
yeah,
It wouldn't matter. We'd usually win the first playoff game anyway. But we'll see how that affects them. I
yeah.
just until I see it, I think it's impossible to win in Denver right now. With how good this team is, how good they are at home, the altitude, like we talked about,
Right.
they haven't lost at Denver in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And so until I see the Heat beat them there, I don't believe that they can. And if they really can't, like if I'm right about that, that means that the Nuggets are going to win games 1, 2, and 5. Right. So then all they have
Yeah.
to do to win in 5 is take one of the two in Miami. Like they split in Miami, come back,
Right.
put it away in 5. That's why I picked 5. I also
Yeah.
just from like an on-court matchup perspective, taking the environmental factors out of it,
Hmm.
I I mean, you can say this about every team in the NBA, but I have no idea what Miami is going to do with Jokic. I
Yeah.
don't
I
know.
mean, that's what every team in the NBA has been saying for the last 3 years.
No, I
So,
I agree. That's what I was saying, but like I mean, I think Miami is particularly ill-equipped to deal with him. He has 2 inches and 30 pounds on Bam. And I love Bam. I'm a big Bam guy. Do you know who the bigs on Miami's roster are besides Bam?
they're not very big. I remember that.
I mean, it's not even
They
size.
they haven't even been playing like bigs past Bam, if I'm remembering
Yeah,
correctly.
it's
Don't they have
Cody
like Cody
Zeller.
Zeller?
It's
Yeah.
Cody Zeller and Kevin Love.
And yeah, Kevin Love gets like 10, maybe 15 minutes a game. And Zeller gets even less than that. Like it's literally just to give guys a breather. You're not expecting anything out of him.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
not a great formula
Yeah.
going up against Jokic.
Yeah, and I hear that. And still, like I think you can look at the Nuggets defensively and they haven't really shown anything all year long that indicates that they're particularly well equipped to deal with Jimmy Butler, too. So,
Well, except they've been the number one defensive team since the playoffs started. So,
yeah, but I mean, they played some teams on the way there that I think were vastly overrated at where they were. So, but this is not my time to shit on the Lakers again. So,
every time is a good time to shit on the Lakers, though. No, but like, I mean, their biggest issue
yeah.
during the year to me was that I was worried about them guarding wings. It came to fruition a little bit in the Suns series where they dropped 2 games to the Suns because Durant and Booker had like all-time
Yeah.
low performances, but they couldn't keep it up and they couldn't do it in Denver.
Yeah.
So, like Jimmy,
Right.
even if Jimmy does go off,
Hmm.
and we talked a little bit earlier this week that his legs looked like they were kind of going out on him a little bit in game 5 and 6.
Yeah.
He looked way better in game 7.
Yep. And he's getting 3 days to rest.
He gets a couple days. Yeah, I actually thought he looked better in game 7, not necessarily because his legs were fully back, but because he was not hesitating at all.
Yeah.
He was just attacking, and that's the Jimmy Butler that they're going to need to see.
Yeah. Well, it was game 7, and there was a sense of urgency. It wasn't, oh, we've got a 3-game lead, like we got this in the bag. It was okay, now it's time to kill.
I just think it's going to take more than Jimmy.
Yeah. No, and this is where it's going to be crucial for Caleb Martin and Max Strus and all these other guys that if they can get Tyler Herro back in this series, that would be huge for them because they need that additional score.
Well, assuming that you talk about being out of rhythm.
Yeah.
It's been even longer for him and he's coming back off an injury. So
yeah,
I said this last week and I was wrong, but I'm going to stick by it that Caleb Martin cannot possibly continue to play at the rate at which he has played for the last couple of weeks.
You are just a glutton for punishment.
I was looking.
He keeps doing it.
I was looking at his stats from the Celtics series. I don't know if you're ready for this. 19 points per game on 74% true shooting. 74.
Yeah.
74% true shooting. His offensive rating for the series was 140. It does not seem possible to continue at that level. For reference, Jokic's offensive rating in his 2 MVP seasons was 130 and 126. Caleb Martin was at 140 for 7 games where he played a significant amount of minutes. This is not like, Luke Cornett for Boston. His offensive rating was like 160 because he came off the bench and hit 1 shot or something like that.
Yeah.
Caleb Martin played over 80 minutes in game 6 and 7 combined, and his offensive rating was better than Jokic when he won the MVP.
Yeah.
It can't possibly continue at this rate against a team that's playing much better defense than the Celtics were playing.
I mean, you say that, but every time you've said it, he has. So
no, he hasn't. That's the thing. He hasn't played at the same pace. He's only gotten better. Every time I say it, he gets better.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think what you're doing here is undervaluing the power of Caleb Martin. Actual league MVP, Caleb Martin.
Caleb, literally better than Michael Jordan Martin. I texted you the other day and I was like, Caleb Martin is the Heat's true leader. He's pushed Jimmy aside and taken his powers. And you were like, yeah, but Jimmy Butler is responsible for more points in this game.
Statistically correct.
I'll tell the fans the same thing. That Jimmy's life is super easy because he gets to pass to Caleb Martin. And Caleb, when you pass to Caleb Martin, it's an automatic bucket. It shouldn't even count as an assist. Unbelievable. I actually all joking aside, I love the story.
Yeah.
For Martin to be playing this well at this time of year for a guy whose career average was 9 points per game going into that series to show up the way that he showed. Like, he dominated game 7.
Yeah.
He was incredible.
Well, and it's not like he's just sitting there hitting spot up shots. We literally saw him drive, go down the baseline past the basket, and then like spin, turn, and hit a fadeaway mid range shot like multiple times in that game. And it's like, okay, but the Hornets didn't need that.
Did you see the highlight reel comparing Caleb Martin to Kobe Bryant?
Yeah.
It was it was funny. He did the Kobe, like Kobe used to catch the ball kind of like in the post slash on the elbow
Yeah.
and do this like turn over one shoulder, turn over the other, back over one shoulder, and like kind of like back and forth and create some space and then hit a fadeaway. And they showed Caleb Martin doing like exactly that in game 6. And I was just like, oh my God. We're that it's the beautiful thing about sports is that this Miami team lost their first play-in game to the Hawks
Yeah.
and then should have lost to the Bulls in the second play-in game. And just from the end of that Bulls game to now, this team has been insanely hot shooting threes.
Yeah.
They were a bottom 5 shooting team in the regular season. And now they're shooting something like 43% for the playoffs. Like, it's a great story, like just coming
Yeah.
out of nowhere to be insanely hot. It's just like, can you keep up that pace against the Denver Nuggets?
And honestly, when they're really running their offense and like moving the ball nicely, like it's really pretty basketball. It's just I don't know. There were moments in that game 7 where I was growing frustrated with the Heat because I was like, okay, well now you're settling for shots. Like uh but you saw them kind of put it together and start like playing the team basketball that's gotten them this far. And then they got out to that, 20 plus point lead. And that's what they need in order to have a shot in this series. Because if they play that kind of offense, then I mean, I don't like you can play good solid defense, but it's really hard to follow all the ball movement and setting good picks and all that stuff. So uh they they can't afford to get into the hero ball mode where everyone's kind of trying to find their own shot and then just settling.
Yeah, I just assuming that Denver can get back into the groove they were in the last couple rounds,
Yeah.
their ability to generate quality shots every single time down the floor
Yeah.
is absolutely stunning. Like, and we've talked about Jokic just having a unique combination of size, feel, and like just passing ability that we've never seen in the history of the NBA.
Yeah. Well, honestly, the more I think about it, the player that's hurt most by Denver sweeping the Lakers is Jamal Murray. Because we have seen how streaky he is. And I don't think that a long layoff is particularly well suited to that. Now, granted, get a couple games under his belt and, could be right back in it. So, but every game matters. So, coming out cold and, I'm never going to count out Spoelstra to come up with a game plan that's going to make things difficult to start a series because there's a reason why he's renowned as like one of the 2 best coaches in the league.
Yeah, and I think the Heat still have the coaching advantage in this matchup. It's
Mike
just
Malone's no joke though.
That's what I was gonna say. Is it's just not going to be as pronounced as it
Yeah.
was against the Celtics because Mike Malone is legit. I mean, he's been one of the top 5 coaches in the league this season as
Yeah.
well. So it's not a huge edge for Miami. The thing I'm concerned about, like you talked about Jamal Murray too, Miami really struggled to guard point guards this year.
Hmm.
Point guards averaged just under 24 points per game against Miami, regular season and playoffs. So,
Yeah.
like, you're going to struggle to guard Murray. You're going to struggle to guard Jokic.
Yeah.
That just is a recipe for disaster to me.
Yeah. I mean, I think the question, if you are Miami, is do you just say, Jimmy, you're on Jamal Murray?
They found some like interesting guys to throw out there with what's the guy's name from West Virginia, Highmore.
Yeah.
I like the energy that he brought a lot
Hmm.
on both sides of the ball. Like they have some guys they can throw at Jamal Murray, but it's
Yeah.
like, if Jimmy's on Murray, like the Nuggets are a big team. Who's
Yeah.
on like Michael Porter Jr.? Who's on Aaron Gordon? Who's
Yeah.
on
That's the question that you have to answer there is like, how much are you gaining by saying, you know, we're putting Jimmy on Murray because, yeah, like he can make things really rough on him, right? But you're giving away, an advantage at another spot. Whereas if you can piecemeal a plan together to kind of like be somewhat okay on dealing with Jamal Murray, but you throw Jimmy at Michael Porter Jr. Okay, well, you're pretty much negating Michael Porter Jr. Like, I do not see him holding up well to the physical brand that Jimmy Butler is going to bring.
I'm okay with that if I'm Denver though.
Yeah,
Like I'm like, okay, whatever. He's gonna take on Porter Jr., but like
yeah,
now who's guarding
or like
Jamal and
yeah,
Bruce
Aaron
Bowen
Gordon.
and like,
Yeah,
they're Denver just has so many options,
yeah,
and whatever mismatch you do leave gets amplified because of Jokic.
yeah.
And like not only is Jokic a huge problem, but he's just gonna find dudes all
Do
over the
they
place.
do they just go zone?
I'm sure they'll throw the zone at Denver,
Yeah,
but it's funny because like they threw the zone at Boston, and whenever they threw the zone at them, it just completely broke the Celtics' brains.
yeah. It's not going to do that to Jokic. It might surprise him like the first time you throw it at him, but
Well, that's what I was
then
gonna
he's
say.
going to
It's like
recognize like, oh, you're playing zone. Okay.
there's a huge difference between throwing the ball into Al Horford in the high post against a zone and
Yeah.
then Nikola Jokic against a
Yeah.
zone. Like I I think they do go zone. They ran more zone this season than any team has run in the last 25 years of the NBA.
Yeah.
Uh, so they're obviously going to run it and they're going to throw it at him. But like,
Mhm.
if there's any player
Yeah.
in the NBA who could pick apart a zone,
Yeah.
it's going to be the guy on Denver.
I just think you have to mix it up a lot. Like you just can't run the same thing all game.
No, it's like playing a great quarterback in the NFL, where if
Yeah.
you got to disguise your coverages, you got to show like all sorts of different looks, you got to like mix things up on him. And if you let him read what you're doing ahead of time, you're screwed.
Yeah.
So like they got to throw a bunch of different looks at Jokic. I'm saying like put out a bio on him, put Jimmy on him, like try to throw him off that way a little
Yeah.
bit, throw zones at him, blitz him on certain plays. Like
Yep.
you got to throw everything that Spoelstra has in his playbook.
Hmm.
They have to throw at Jokic.
Yeah.
I think from game one. And the longer the series goes, the more creative Spoelstra is going to have to get
Yeah.
with the different looks they give him.
half joking here, but kind of not even half joking. Like it just like draw out of a hat like what you're gonna run at him at any given point in time. Because like it has to be so random that there's no rhyme or reason to it for him to like figure it out ahead of time.
I'm waiting for, that giant ridiculous hat that Jimmy Butler was wearing.
Yes.
Spoelstra just has that on the sidelines and they're like picking like ping pong balls out of it and then calling the plays in. I love it. So I mean, I'm hoping we get a good finals. Obviously,
Yeah.
I would like to watch a 6-7 game finals. Um, my pick is that it's going to be shorter than that, and that Denver is going to take care of business starting Thursday night in Denver. So I got Denver in 5. You got Denver in
Yeah.
6. Which
I got Denver in 6. I don't know, I think the Heat are easily the best team that they will have played in the playoffs so far. So
we'll see. I'm still partial to that Suns team. I still think that with Durant and Booker, that's a pretty tough team to play.
I mean, I will give you the Suns are a more talented team. I don't think they have a cohesive plan. And I think that inevitably is why that team was not successful this year.
Yeah. Well, either way, I'm super excited to watch the finals, which is nice because, like you said, it's just nice to have something that's a little bit different. Like the Warriors have been there so much,
Yeah.
the Celtics and Lakers and, any LeBron team. It's been so
Yeah.
much in our lifetimes that it's just nice to see something different. And I'll be happy for Denver if they do win. So,
Yeah. And ESPN gets to be sad, and that makes you and I happy. So,
yeah, this is the thing with ESPN and the ratings. Like, people are pushing this like small market narrative thing just because it's not like the Lakers versus Celtics that the national media really
yeah.
wanted. And if Denver does, like, say Denver does win in 5 or 4, and people are going to push this like narrative that it was a bad finals because 2 small market teams made it. And I just want you all to know ahead of time that that is not the case. Like, these are clear. I think this is very clearly the best team in the East versus the best team in the West right now. I think the Heat have proven by taking down the Bucks, the Knicks, and the Celtics that since the playoffs started, they are the best team in the East. Denver's been the best team in the West all season and probably the best team in the league all season. These teams
Yeah.
deserve to be here. Do not let ESPN tell you differently. Yeah, Denver's just a team that gives me hope as a Kings fan.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously they hit the all-time lottery getting a generational talent like Jokic in the second round.
Yeah.
But it's a team that has done everything, quote unquote, the right way. They drafted Jokic, they drafted Murray, they drafted Porter. They made a couple good trades to top off this unit with Gordon and with, they acquired KCP and Bruce Bowen.
Yeah.
Or I keep saying Bruce Bowen.
It's Bruce Brown.
Bruce Brown. They wish they had Bruce Bowen,
Yeah.
man. Bruce Bowen was a G. Well, like, this isn't like a big market, like, oh, hey, we're going to go, we're going to sign LeBron James and then we're going to trade for Anthony Davis. And now all of a sudden we're going to go win a championship kind of thing. It's like, it shows that a smaller market team who builds the right way can still compete in the modern NBA. And I think that that is a really good lesson to take away from this season.
Yeah. I mean, I hope that more teams like take that message.
Well, and it's like a good lesson for not giving up as well on your core, because like we're so quick to, we're talking about, we did a whole thing about Jaylen Brown potentially getting traded. We're so quick to move guys nowadays and change like, okay, it didn't work, we got to make these wholesale changes. They've kept this core together, this Jokic, Murray, core, and Michael Porter Jr. too. They could have traded Michael Porter Jr. for another superstar multiple times.
Yeah.
Or at least another big piece.
Yeah.
And they've kept this core together, and they've been banging their head against the wall, the wall. Can't quite get there. And it's just like a couple tweaks to bring in Bruce, and to bring in like a couple of guys who just took the talent they already had and put them over the top.
Yeah.
Along with the evolution of the current stars on their roster.
Yeah. I mean, we touched on Portland, right? And they have the number 3 pick this year, in a class that a lot of people say is a 3-player class. Well, I mean, if you're able to get one of those guys that is an impact player, and you continue to develop the incredibly young Shaedon Sharpe that you drafted the year before, and you do what Denver did in picking up a piece here, a piece there, when they have a little bit depressed value to fill roles on the roster. Suddenly you have a better team than you ever had with CJ McCollum. So
it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. I'm looking forward to it. Game 1 starts tonight, the night that this podcast is being released. So, but that is it for us for today. As always, Fouled Out can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Cast, Overcast, anywhere you get your podcast. You can hit us up on Twitter at Fouled Out Sports, and you can find Matt on Twitter at Matador_defense. You can find our videos on TikTok at Fouled Out Sports Podcast. It's a long name, but you can't miss it. Like I said, NBA Finals starts tonight. Matt and I will be back next week after Game 3 to kind of break down what's going on in the finals so far, where we're at, where we're going, kind of thing. The nice thing for the podcast, but the bad thing as a fan for the NBA Finals, the games are like really far apart.
Yeah.
Like Game 1 is Thursday. Game 2 is not till Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
And then Game 3 is like, I think next Wednesday or something like that.
Yeah. And I guess we didn't really touch on this earlier, but that's also a thing that kind of helps Miami there, because you get that extra time to acclimate to the climate. I don't know that it's enough, but there's nothing like having the extra time to adjust to it.
Yeah, so it's Thursday and then Sunday and then Wednesday. So we may actually be back after Game 2. Keep an eye out. We'll be back next week to talk about
sometime.
So, but all right, everybody, enjoy the first couple of games of the finals, and we'll see you soon.
Yep.
Bye, guys.
Bye, Robin.
Bye, Mom.